Fixed. Warfield on Celestial Eldrazi sitting on the left. Russell Lee, Grixis Dash Shadow sitting on the right. This is likely a matchup where play draw is going to be a factor. You have a Noble Hierarch deck versus a Thoughtseize deck. You want to get the momentum going in your favor.
Oh, for sure. I mean, all the draw spells in the world, all the discard spells in the world are relatively useless if not backed up by some sort of threat.
Okay, so Lee is on the play, though, on a 6-card hand. Bloodstained Mire Go is where Lee will start. Forest Noble Hierarch for Warfield.
Now, coming out of the gates here, I'm curious to see what Russell is going to be fetching for and how much damage they're going to take. Looks like a fetch and a shock here. Going to send Russell to 17. Is it a Fatal Push? Is it a Thought Scour?
A Watery Grave. Those are the two likely options. I see a Thought Scour being pushed in front of the hand. That'll be the play. Summer Denial, Jace Vryn's Prodigy milled over. The Jace a one-of in the deck.
Yeah, it's a pretty potent one-of, though, against a number of matchups. You know, if your opponent is giving you time to develop, a Jace Vryn's Prodigy can loot away some extra lands, and then once it transforms, it acts kind of like a reusable Snapcaster Mage.
Yeah, sort of replacing the 1x Faithless Looting spot, I suppose, when you talk about looting. And Lee is going to use Dismember on the Noble Hierarch and a slow Warfield down, going to 13 for that. We'll see what Warfield has as a follow-up. Looks like Eldrazi Temple and Eldrazi Displacer in hand. Prismatic Vista, though, is the play. Perhaps I misread the Temple. Warfield a pass. See if Lee wants to crack this Scalding Tarn or not. That'll be fetched away. The life total does need to be updated. It was a Dismember, so Lee should be going to 12 off of this, depending if the land is tapped or not. That'll be tapped Blood Crypt. Lead is 12. Plenty of cards in graveyards, so we could see a Gurmag Angler here.
Yeah, and no shock from the Blood Crypt might mean that there's no Death Shadow, and that's good news for Allie. We'll see just what Russell has to deploy this turn, if anything. I saw a promo Snapcaster Mage hanging out over there.
Yeah, I see a Snapcaster, a Lightning Bolt. Here's a Bloodstained Mire, and there's at least one more land in the hand. Warfield will fetch to 19 end step. Prismatic Vista can find another forest. There's 2 plains. One of those will be the find. There's also a basic Waste in the deck, in case she needed colorless mana.
Yeah, Prismatic Vista is a boon to these colorless strategies, if only because they allow you to play multiple colors. It acts kind of like a 3-color fetch land.
Let's see what Warfield can do from here. You see a Karn the Great Creator hanging out in the hand. Eldrazi Temple's the land, so here's Noble Hierarch.
So I think you were right about the Temple, but with Force Eldrazi Temple, she was unable to deploy the Eldrazi Displacer was the problem.
Ah, exactly right. Yeah, even though the card is colorless because of Devoid, it does have that hard white requirement.
Right. So a bit of tension there in the casting costs among a lot of these Eldrazi, simply because of the harsh colorless requirement on some of them.
And this time, Lee is going to take some damage, fetching for an untapped Watery Grave going to 9.
It's a bit dangerous, just because a lot of times the Eldrazi deck just hits the 5th mana source, casts Reality Smasher, and all of a sudden, you know, you're one more swing away from death. But you have to imagine a Snapcaster Mage is coming here off the fetch. Dismember, though, if it's the target, it's going to end up dealing a boatload of damage to Russell.
It's just going to be Thought Scour off of the Snapcaster Mage. Street Wraith Snapcaster Mage flipped over. The draw was another Thought Scour. Ooh, there's a pickup. Lee draws Death Shadow for turn.
Yeah, but with Eldrazi Displacer at the ready, it's not going to be a huge threat until Russell actually deals with the Eldrazi Displacer. It'll force Allie to hold up some mana if she doesn't want to get combo killed with like a Temur Battle Rage or something. But with Allie at 19, it's going to be a little while.
So we have the combination of Mistress Bobble fetch land. You saw the Bobble. Looks like no quick fetch. There's the Lightning Bolt, so Displacer down. Here's an attack with Snapcaster Mage. Warfield to 17.
Yeah, now this is really bad news for Allie. She's going to need a big turn on the follow-up. Hopefully something like Path to Exile plus a threat.
All right, there's a Path in the hand. Could have Path and Karn on this turn.
Now, if I'm Allie, I might actually lead off here with the Karn as a bait for a Stubborn Denial. hope that gets countered, and then Path to Exile the Death Shadow when the shields are down.
Lee drew the card that was left there with the Mishra's Bauble. Looks like a Teamer Battle Rage. And a Fatal Push is the hand.
Okay.
Warfield starts with Path to Exile in the Shadow, and that works.
Yeah, that's good news for Allie. Death Shadow out of the way. No Stubborn Denial means that the Karn is also probably going to resolve. And now it becomes a question of what do you actually search for. In her sideboard, she has one copy of Batterskull, which seems like an okay thing to go get in this spot. In Snaring Bridge, it's really hard for the Shadow deck to win through attacking, or win without attacking, but they do have 2 Kolaghan's commands in the main deck that they can find. The Mycosynth or Liquid Metal Coating, those are not really great in this spot. You have to imagine Karn is not going to survive for too long. And then Walking Ballista, which can take care of the Snapcaster Mage, might be a pretty good one.
Warfield's going to think it over.
If she has a 5th mana source in hand, I think that would be a good hit. But, you know, turning lands into artifacts and then plussing the Karn is also pretty sweet.
So Liquid Metal Coating was picked up.
When I hear the word Liquid Metal Coating, I think of a bunch of these like weird draft decks I used to have where I was trying to use Liquid Metal Coating plus the abundance of shatter effects during Scars of Mirrodin Unlimited. And it works pretty well with Karn. You know, it shuts down certain activated abilities of permanence, which is nice.
So the Snapcaster knocked the Karn to 1. I think that's why you saw Warfield grab the Coating too, just because she'll at least be able to use that to Stone Rain Lee from here.
Yeah, and that's going to cut him off of red. And with Allie having a backup, Karn the Great Crater, it's not that big of a deal if this one dies. You see Russell has a hand that has Fatal Push. There's a chance they use the Fatal Push to kill the Noble Hierarch and then cleanly kill the Karn. And then Allie can just deploy the second one, go get Walking Ballista or Batterskull or what have you.
This time Warfield has that Noble Hierarch potentially on defense. We'll see if Lee wants to Fatal Push it just to get through and hit the Karn. That is the play. Karn down.
But now this new Karn, you know, normally you see a Karn the Great Crater and immediately minuses. There's a chance Allie just goes Karn, tick up on your land, Liquid Metal Coating, destroy it.
No follow-up for Lee, so presumably no more threats picked up. Warfield's going to crack Prismatic Vista at the end step to 16. Forest and Plains pretty interchangeable here with that Talisman of Unity. She'll find a Plains.
There is a 1 of a Snaring Bridge that Allie could go play. If she has another land, she could go Karn minus a Snaring Bridge and then have most of the threats locked down from Russell's side, and then eventually get Mycosynth Lattice and go for that route.
Pickup was Eldrazi Displacer, so you could see Warfield just cast both of these things, use the Coating to Stone Rain.
Yeah, and that'll also put Karn at 6 loyalty, which is gigantic.
That really lays up to Mycosynth Lattice on the following turn, if that's what we see. You have to be mindful of Lee having some kind of interaction. Like that Warfield led on the Karn, you don't want to go Displacer and then get Stubborn Denialed. You see Liquid Metal Coating on one of those Watery Graves. Intention for the Karn to plus on it next.
Now, Russell has actually floated mana here, or else it actually just gets locked down by the Karn's ability until end of turn. But now that it is an artifact, Allie will go ahead and plus with the Karn.
And here's the Displacer.
I would have liked to have seen Allie move to second main phase because of the floating mana, because now Russell actually gets to fetch and go Snapcaster Mage plus spell out of the graveyard without having to fetch twice. This potentially ends up mattering for life total purposes.
See Lee fetching twice at end step.
Oh, maybe she did actually, if Lee is double fetching.
It could just be that you got to get some lands out of the way because Lee needs a big draw step. That Karn has to go away.
Yeah, not a whole lot of fetchable lands left. Does go ahead and get the last 2 red sources, fetching way, way down.
You see an untapped Steam Vents here. So there's Snapcaster Mage. Targets Lightning Bolt.
It's probably going to take care of the Displacer.
Yep, Displacer down. And now Lee can use that Teamer Battle Rage to attack with both creatures, and that does get the Karn.
Yeah, and with Allie having no cards left in hand, it's going to leave her resource light. Does Russell want to burn it? It might be worthwhile because your lands are still going to be under duress. Little miscommunication. I think Lee wants to perhaps cast the Battle Rage. Damage hasn't been announced yet.
There it is.
All right, 6 damage, takes care of the Karn. Now we're going to have a follow-up, a Gurmag Angler. Pretty good turn cycle for Lee, if I do say so.
Yeah, turn things all the way around. Now the pressure is back on Warfield. Draw, go.
Yeah, and here's 9 damage coming through. If Allie doesn't hit something good on this next turn, we're going to game 2.
Warfield to 7, looking for a Reality Smasher. That would be the biggest hit. Well, Thought-Knot's here. Takes a Thoughtseize, but that has to jump in front of the Gurmag Angler is the problem.
Yeah, just one life point kind of off of being able to eat a Snapcaster Mage.
Lee draws and casts Thought Scour. Now we see an attack with all the creatures. Warfield at 7 will put the Thought Knot in front of the Angler. Lee will draw a card.
Yeah, and a Death Shadow for Lee means that even a Reality Smasher here is not going to get the job done.
Ancient Stirrings for Warfield.
Oh, I thought he had Death Shadow. I was the Inquisition of Kozilek. I messed up. Never mind. A 5-looker and missed.
There's a Displacer in the holding, but that can only displace one thing.
Yeah, but it can
block
displace the Gurmag.
Snapcaster, displace Gurmagler. Yeah, that might be good enough. At least to buy a turn.
Yep. Don't really like just having to displace a Snapcaster Mage.
No. So here's Displacer. Now the pressure on Lee to draw something.
Looks like a Mishra's Bauble. That's not something. And I think that Lee just has a discard spell, and I don't know the third card. If it's Fatal Push, then he'll be able to turn on the Mishra's Bauble, or the Revolt with Mishra's Bauble.
I think it is a Fatal Push.
Ugh.
Yeah, that should seal it here. Warfield's at 3. The 2 Snapcaster Mages will get across.
That is brutal.
Game number 1 going to Russell Lee.
What looked like Allison in a really great position there, just turned around so quickly, but that is the power of Death Shadow. You have cards like Snapcaster Mage, which not only act as additional removal spells or card draw in spots where you need them to be, but they also attack. And when your life total just completely goes from 16 all the way down to 7 and 1 attack from a Gurmag Angler and a couple Snapcaster Mages, just completely changes all the combat math and racing scenarios.
So players going to sideboards. Allie Warfield on Selesnya Eldrazi featuring Karn the Great Creator. So you're seeing a sideboard that's largely artifacts that Karn can grab. The only non-artifact cards, those 2 Dismembers. There are some redundant artifacts with the idea being you can board some copies in.
Right.
The Damping Sphere, the Grafdigger's Cage. They don't really play here though.
Yeah, I think the only card I really want to bring in if I'm Allie is the 2 Dismembers. I might want to bring in the cards that are just okay to cast, like Batterskull or Walking Ballista, if you have cards in your main deck that you definitely want to get out of there. I don't know that there are that many cards. I mean, most of her deck is full of creatures. I haven't been too impressed by Talisman of Unity, but it's a part of the mana base, and it's hard to justify cutting cards like that.
Mm-hmm. Sideboard for Russell Lee on Grixis Death Shadow, 3 Collective Brutality, 2 Abrade, 2 Damping Sphere, 2 Disdainful Stroke, 2 Kolaghan's Commands, 2 Plague Engineer, a Liliana of the Veil, and a Liliana the Last Hope.
So for Russell, you got to approach this, I think, from a control standpoint. You got to slow things down a little bit. I'm trying to figure out exactly how I want to sideboard. Abrade seems like it's okay. You know, there are quite a few artifacts coming at him. Thanks to Allie's Karn the Great Creators. Disdainful Stroke counters the big Eldrazi, but there's enough cheap stuff in the deck that it's not that useful. Kolaghan's Command seems like it's okay, similarly to Abrade, especially because of both of the Sword of Feast and Famine and Fire and Ice, thanks to the Stoneforge Mystics. But I don't believe Russell actually saw Stoneforge in those games, so Russell might not be aware that that package is in the deck. So it'll be interesting to see exactly how they sideboard.
Wednesday nights on this very channel, twitch.tv/SCG Tour, you can check out Commander Versus.
Oh, yeah.
Watch the whole Commander versus crew battling out with their 100-card decks every Wednesday at 5 p.m.
Yeah, and those do end up on YouTube later on too. So if you can't quite catch it live, make sure to check out Star City's YouTube page. Not only do we put Commander Versus up on there, we have a ton of other great stuff for you.
Probably some sweet new decks with the Commander 2019 product just coming out.
Yeah, I think either last week or the week before, they actually just played decks based around those commanders or just played them straight out of the box. I forget which, but I remember seeing some tweets about it.
I do like to play them straight out of the box unsleeved.
Yeah, I mean, that's how God intended.
Exactly. Players drawing up opening hands for game number 2 here. Warfield with a pretty quick mulligan.
Yeah, thanks to the London mulligan, you know, if your hand is bad, you can just ship it back, you know. Just get a better one. Yep. You get a look at 7. Pick your best 6.
Lee will join. I do think that Eldrazi Temple is a pretty serious gainer from the London mulligan. Back when Eye of Ugin was legal, the Eldrazi deck, the very broken Eldrazi deck, just mulliganed all the time. Now you only have Temple. Having that extra look for it is very helpful.
Oh, for sure. You have a lot of potentially busted draws with this Celestial Eldrazi deck. If only because you not only do you have the Eldrazi Temples, but you also just have Noble Hierarch. If you ever paired Noble Hierarch with Eldrazi Temple, you get those turn 2 Thought-Knot Seers that we saw just a few years ago when Eldrazi ran rampant.
Right. That's kind of what you were saying about maybe not liking the Talisman of Unity. It doesn't enable the turn 2. It only ramps you up to turn 3.
Right, but it does have its place, and your deck can utilize most of the mana. I'm curious if you have enough colored mana, maybe they could just be Mind Stones like the colorless Eldrazi decks that we're used to seeing. You know, they help you ramp into a turn 3 Reality Smasher when you don't have a either a land or a Noble Hierarch, whichever one you're missing, while also, you know, providing you with a way to cycle them later on. You know, if Allie was able to turn one of those talismans into a fresh card, the whole game could have been different there at the end. But, you know, she also wouldn't have had colored mana on turn 2 when she played a ramp spell or whatever, so whatever.
Both players have kept 6. Brushland is the first play for Warfield. Lee will bobble Warfield. Shock for Blood Crypt and Thoughtseize. Take a look at the hand. We have Forest, Plains, Path to Exile, Sword of Feast and Famine, and Karn the Great Creator.
This is contextual. I would have to assume that Russell is either taking Path to Exile or Karn the Great Creator, especially when Russell has access to so many copies of Kolaghan's Command between main deck and sideboard.
So Karn was hit. So Lee at 16. Warfield just had Plains go, and Lee misses on the second land, and there's a Thought Scour in hand with no blue mana. Warfield picks up and casts an Ancient Stirring. Is going to 19 out the Brushland. Yeah,
the Death Shadow deck can operate on one land quite well, though. Eventually, when it does draw the second land, that's usually when it goes into turbo mode. Unfortunately for Russell, it's just a Blood Crypt instead of one of those watery graves.
Warfield grabs Cavern of Souls, passing over a Karn the Great Creator. Cavern of Souls named Eldrazi. You see Lee drawing and cycling some Street Wraiths, down to 12 off of 2 of those.
Yeah, but if they are able to find a Death Shadow, deploying that pretty early on here could be quite good. And Allison is not really incentivized to use the Path to Exile just yet.
Right, with Lee missing that second land, a path would open up blue mana. So here's a 1/1 Death Shadow. We'll go over to Warfield, not casting the path.
It's just a Death Shadow, Michael. What could it be? A 10/10?
Well, here's a much better way to check the Shadow. Eldrazi Displacer.
Yeah, that's a nice one. Not only is the body slightly larger, but oh, here comes Thoughtseize here. Allie gonna go ahead and fire off the path.
Yeah, path in response. We see a hand of Thought-Knot Seer, Sword of Feast and Famine.
Woo boy, this could get real nasty. If Russell takes the Thought-Knot Seer, if Allie draws a land, things are gonna get real bad real fast.
Yeah, Displacer with that sword is ugly.
That is a lot of mana.
Protection from black and more than 3 toughness. And it just keeps blinking out your creatures.
Yeah, at that point, Russell's going to need one of those disenchant type effects to get rid of the sword before they can even deal with the Displacer. Land?
don't think it was a land.
I think it was another Path to Exile, which is also okay. Russell did have a backup Death Shadow, if I'm not mistaken.
So you see a cast of the sword and attack for 3. Lead a 7. There's another Death Shadow, and the pickup return was Thought Scour. Ooh, Watery Grave. Lead a 5. A Braid on the Displacer. All right, that was going to cover it one way or the other in the matter of the sword. And there's the Death Shadow. Path to Exile will cover it while Lee is tapped low. But now Warfield needs to draw something. And this is only 4 mana, so a Smasher wouldn't be good. Ugh, Talisman of Unity. I saw the 2 mana. I thought it might have been a Stoneforge Mystic.
I was hoping. Yeah, the deck is really dense with threats at the moment. A lot of cards off the top are quite good, but Russell here getting to untap at 5 life with no threat on the opponent's side of the battlefield, and you have to imagine that they're pretty happy with the current situation, you know.
Lee fetches to 4.
If you go to 2 and put yourself, ooh, maybe we had life totals a little bit wrong.
It's an untapped Blood Crypt. Now Lee at 2.
Okay. Maybe the Blood Crypt was announced. The judge says Russell's at 2. Russell's at 2.
There's a Thought Scour. It's like Disdainful Stroke, Dismember flipped over, and the Scalding Tarn picked up. And Gurmag Angler will join the party.
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, Russell does have a Kolaghan's Command in hand, so that Sword of War or Feast of Famine is no longer a substantial threat.
Neither is the next draw step, most likely.
Sure. Yeah, that would be a pretty good 1-2 punch. Blow up the sword, make Allie discard the card drawn for turn, and with her deck operating mostly at sorcery speed.
So there you see it. Draw step, destroy your sword, and discard your Reality Smasher. Wow. Angler comes across, Warfield to 14.
Smasher off the top.
That would have been a good top deck.
Smasher off the top. Smasher! Oh!
Oh, that's not Seer. Not quite.
All right, still pretty good.
Take a look at the hand of Inquisition of Kozilek, Temur Battle Rage. Make that the hand of Inquisition of Kozilek.
Yeah, I'm going to take that TBR. That's the one that can potentially smush me in a turn or 2.
And now the Angler has to hang back.
Top deck. Come on!
Just a draw and a go from Warfield.
Warfield's had a number of great finishes here on the SCG Tour, but has yet to crack into one of those top 8s. Looking for her first here. Got a lot of ways to go. She wants to get there, but step 1 was drawing a threat that made that Gurmag Angler have to sit back.
Draw go in this position is really interesting because there's not that many cards in Warfield's deck that you wouldn't just cast.
Right.
Haven't been able to get a look at those cards.
They just have to be lands.
That's my assumption.
Sideboarded and Snaring Bridge.
Yeah, Inquisition, we see a Prismatic Vista in a forest. Makes a lot of sense.
So Russell is going to crack the fetch now after looking at the top card with the Bauble.
Going to 1 to do so.
Right. Warfield here can win the game with a Karn, the Great Creator, fetching Walking Ballista if it's still in the sideboard. She can win with a Reality Smasher. Any creature's going to put her in good shape.
Path to Exile. How about that?
That might be it. That might be the one.
Path to your Angler. Who's dead?
Thought Scour here.
Respond with Thought Scour. Gotta find Stubborn Denial.
Or Snapcaster Mage on a Fatal Push or a Fatal Push itself.
Yep, that would play too. Attack with Thought Knot Seer.
Russell goes digging through the graveyard. You have to assume here comes a Snappy Boy. Doesn't have a removal spell for the Thought Knot Seer, looks like. Might have to be a chump block. Doesn't even have another blue mana source to be able to Thought Scour. So this could be just a 2-mana chump block and Snapcaster Mage.
Yeah, that's all it is. Now Lee has to draw something.
It's another Mishra's Bauble. He's got to find a removal spell off the top.
So check on Bauble, and Lee picks him up.
What a game.
Warfield ends up squeaking out game number 2. We're going to 3.
And that was a really odd game. Russell dealt, 15 damage or so? Maybe more? Maybe all 19? I don't know. Maybe a displacer hit one time?
Yes, it did. It did because Warfield missed on the 5th land for the sword, so it connected that one time.
That's right.
But that wouldn't even matter because the Thought-Knot Seer would do 4 instead of 1.
Sure. Well, there's I mean, that's because I'm saying Russell dealt so much damage to themselves, right? Like, if they had not fetched 1 extra time, that's like a whole attack plus another like that they could have made into the face of the Thought-Knot Seer, taking a swing for 4. Russell did draw a Teamer Battle Rage, a second one later on, and that could have potentially stolen the game there.
Yeah.
But, you got to use your life total to manipulate your deck and stuff, so.
The decision points on your life total, fetching, shocking, what have you, are just incredibly complex with the deck, Shadow deck.
Yeah, and things can feel right at the time, and then 5 turns later, you're in a situation where, doing it the other way would have been better, and,
Right. Over on StarCityGames.com, we got a sale going because we've always got a sale going, and right now it's the foil sale.
Ooh.
You can check it out at go.starcitygames.com/sale. Maybe your thing is signature spellbook Jace Brainstorms.
Maybe it's sweet foils from Ultimate Masters. Who knows? I don't even know what Fraction Tower does.
Sacrifices a creature to make 2 black mana.
Oh, that one? Okay, yeah. I just had that art in my brain did not make sense.
Sure.
I just assumed it was a commander card.
Yeah, that is. That was one of those cards where they reprinted it, and I was like, did they get rid of the reserve list? But no, that card was just not on it.
Gotcha.
Saga's weird. There's like 20 cards from it. Show and Tell got me too. I was like, I don't think they can do that. But
Sneak Attack, Show and Tell somehow escaped the reserve list, and now they're the most expensive cards from the set.
I think one of my favorite ones is that City of Traders is on reserve list, but Ancient Tomb is not, and in fact it's been reprinted a couple times. So when people talk about that, like, no reserve list legacy format, I'm like, I can play Ancient Tomb in your format, but not your format doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to play that.
Well, the only reason it makes sense is to punish Wizards of the Coast for doing some weird thing for collectors 20 years ago.
It made a lot of sense when they did it.
I mean,
to be fair.
Did it?
Yes. The game would have not succeeded if they didn't do it. That's just a fact. Okay. All right, players underway for game number 3.
Wow, I'm sorry. That touched the nerve,
it's just true.
Okay. Look, I don't know. I'm just a small boy. I don't know anything.
It looks really bad now. All right, Lee underway, fetching to 19 at the most. I assume 17, possibly 15. Watery Grave.
I think me and Ryan just became enemies.
Oh, yeah, we're fighting.
Shut up, Todd. You don't know anything. All right, Russell leads off with the Thoughtseize here. This is a great start just because it puts him down to 15. There's a good chance he's able to deploy Death Shadow next turn. All it takes is a fetch and a shockland out the deck. And Russell's able to take away the best cards from Allie's hand, potentially disrupting her first few turns.
This is an interesting hand. We have both swords, Fire and Ice and Feast and Famine, Path to Exile, Ancient Stirrings, Horizon Canopy, Prismatic Vista, Brushland.
Yeah, this one is an okay keep in the face of a bunch of discard because you have lands and you have spells. Ancient Stirrings can find one of your better cards. You have a Path to Exile for one of the bigger threats, and this is better than most 6-card hands, but at the same time, having both your swords means that the second Soulforged Mystic is basically dead, and the first one can only get Batterskull. I don't know.
Looking at a Thoughtseize bug here. Path to Exile was taken, Path to Exile was drawn. Brushland, Ancient Stirrings for Warfield, going to 19 to do so.
I only call it the Thoughtseize bug when you scry to the bottom and it's still on top. that was a literal bug.
Sure.
They admitted that sometimes with like Ponder and Preordain, if you click top, the game thought it said bottom.
Yikes.
Yeah. That is the correct response to that, is yikes.
Ancient Stirrings finds Karn the Great Creator. We'll go back to Lee. Starts the turn with the Polluted Delta, going to 14, maybe 12.
Wouldn't be surprised to see just like one of those nutty sequences from Shadow here where turn 1 discard followed by turn 2 discard Death Shadow. You know, you just make sure that the coast is completely clear while also just stripping your opponent of any real defenses for the powerful 1-mana creature.
Delta finds a Blood Crypt untapped, so it is 12. Here's Death Shadow. It's a 1/1.
Blue mana up, has Stubborn Denial, but that's not quite good enough to protect the Shadow right now.
Draw for Warfield was Reality Smasher. Land number 2 is Prismatic Vista. See if and when that Path to Exile goes for the Shadow. Here's Polluted Delta, so that represents just making the Shadow a 4/4. And I believe Lee has a Street Wraith in hand as well. So it's not hard to turn on Stubborn Denial. Here's a fetch to 11.
Yeah, you might see Warfield really regret not using that Path to Exile on upkeep. It's also possible Warfield's just not playing around Stubborn Denial because the likelihood of Stubborn Denial being in Russell Lee's deck in this particular matchup is actually pretty low. It's a pretty low impact card. It basically only hits Karn the Great Creator, Path to Exile, and the occasional equipment that's hard cast. The deck is very dense with creatures.
So we saw untapped Steam Vents and then the cycle of Street Wraith. So Lee at 7, attacking for 6 with the Shadow. Warfield a fetch to 18 off the Vista. Plains Path to Exile.
Yeah,
that
this
gets
is
caught by the stubs.
Easy Stubborn Denial for Russ. See what the follow-up is. Curious if Russ has another threat to play or it's just content sitting on this Death Shadow. It's quite big right now thanks to the Street Wraith cycle and the fetch shocking.
Pick up for Warfield, Cavern of Souls. Hand has some swords and some uncastables. Warfield just passes after playing the Cavern. Eldrazi was the name.
It's a tense moment here for Warfield. Already through 2 Path to Exiles. Not a whole lot of removal left in the deck.
Attack for 6. Warfield's life total becomes that. Noble Hierarch drawn. Potentially a chump blocker. There's that Horizon Canopy. Warfield goes to 5 off the Brushland. Cast the Hierarch. Passes turn. Abrade targets Noble Hierarch. And Warfield is going to concede to that. Russell Lee advances to 12-3, and I believe we'll be seeing Grixis Death Shadow in the top 8.
Yeah, Breaker should be good enough. You know, we talk a little bit about Death Shadow here on the SCG Tour. A lot of times the deck is, I don't want to say made fun of, but a lot of people like to trash Grixis Death Shadow as being unplayable. I know that I myself have mentioned it a time or two just because there are draws that look fairly anemic.
Yes.
But Russell Lee putting up a